Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care. Yeah.
Good evening and welcome to another session of Healing Moments here with the Good News Community Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'd like to welcome everyone who is viewing on Zoom as well as on YouTube. Welcome. Happy April 1st. Today is the 1st of April, and this month we will be covering the topic temperance. So I would like you all to sit back and relax. But remember, this is also an interactive session. So please listen attentively and get your questions ready for question and answer segment. So at this time, we would like to welcome Pastor Lucas to pray for us as well as give us our devotional segment.
Good evening to everybody. We are very glad to be with you again this evening as we have another episode in Healing Moments. Let us all pray as we begin, please. Our Father, we are thankful really for the opportunity that we can be together again. Be with us as we share in the topics for this month. May it be a learning experience for everybody, and that we can also experience healing where we need to experience healing. In Jesus' name we pray. As was mentioned, we are talking about temperance. It's not a very popular word, but it speaks to health. All right? And so we'll be focusing on health throughout this month. For devotional, it's captioned Sisyphus and his eternal burden. Now, the passage comes to us from the book of Isaiah. For I, the Lord, your God, will hold your right hand, saying to you, fear not, I will help you. That's fascinating. Everybody needs help from time to time. Now let's get to Sisyphus. Now he is a Greek character. In Greek mythology, those of us who are familiar with Greek mythology would know or would have heard of Sisyphus. Now he was a character who was known to be intelligent, but he was a trickster. Or should I say, and he was a trickster. So in every episode about his life that we read about, there are tricks that he would always play on people. Now, this angered the gods, according to the myth. And the gods decided that they were going to punish Sisyphus for doing this. So they consigned him to, with the eternal problem of pushing a boulder up a hill. Now, when he got to the top of the hill, the boulder would come back down. They also blinded him. So he had two problems. He was blind, which means he had to find the boulder. Then he had to push this boulder up the hill. And when it got to the top of the hill, it came back down. So he had to go down and start all over again. And it went on through his life because this was his eternal punishment. You know, sometimes we get that feeling that Sisyphus would have gotten out of that particular experience. In the area of health, we sometimes find ourselves like, let's say, the beginning of this year, 2021. People make new vows, new promises to themselves. I will do whatever, I won't do whatever. And then after the first month or so, they'll find themselves back into it. It's a typical health trouble that lots of people have. Some people, decide, well, I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to lose 20 pounds. They start and then they find themselves, for whatever reason, not losing the pounds, or maybe they lose some, then they go right back to the same thing that they lost. So it becomes like a vicious cycle, and it's very frustrating to have to be going through something like this all the time. The story is told of a young woman called Lucy, and she suffered from certain problems. One was bulimia, and the next was anorexia. And she went to all kinds of therapists, and she did get some temporary relief, but then she found herself back at it. So it was a cycle, back and forth, and it is really tiring. It's really stressful to be going through something that you want to get rid of all the time, and you try and you succeed, then you're back at it. So it's a health challenge that lots of people face. But Lucy didn't stop there. Lucy decided, I'm going to talk to God about this. And she talked to God about it. And you know what? She actually gained the victory over the bulimia, also over the anorexia. She actually gained the victory. So she didn't have to resort back to the cycle. The devotion is simply saying to us, as was promised in the book of Isaiah, God said, "For I, the Lord your God, will hold your right hand." Yes, sometimes we need the right hand held because we can't get it done ourselves. I will hold your right hand, saying to you, "Fear not, I will help you." This promise applies to our health, as we shall explore this month. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pastor Lucas. As Pastor Lucas says, God will hold our hand as we try our best to practice temperance, or as some may call it, self-control or self-restraint. At this time, we will also listen to Sister Sherry Sobers, who is our in-house counselor, who will address the meaning of temperance as a virtue in positive psychology. Sister Sherry?
Thank you so much, Lorianne. And good evening, everyone. It's great to be with you again. We are starting a new month. And as we would have said before, we are starting a new topic. And it's one that last month we will really say that we had a good time. We had a really, really good month, interpersonal relationships. And it's amazing how God works, that we chose the topic temperance and the season of the Christian calendar that we are in, and it all works so well together. Isn't our God good? So, as usual, as I begin every month, every topic, I like to give you definitions. And I just don't like to give you one definition. I like to give you a varying amount of definitions, so that when we put it together, we can really understand what the topic or the term or the concept is all about. So we're going to look at the first definition for temperance. And as Lorianne rightly said, it has to do with self-restraint. It has to do with self-control. It is manifested as self-regulation in monitoring and managing one's emotions, one's motivation, behavior, and the self-control is the attainment of adaptive goals. So as Pastor Lucas would have just said, yes, we use temperance a lot as we refer to health, how we eat, what we eat, and but it can be considered in a broader sense. Another definition says it is moderation of self-restraint in action, statement, and for example, self-control. So action, what we do; statement, what we say. It is habitual moderation in the indulgence of a natural appetite or passion. So there's where we get the food aspect of it. Temperance regulates the attraction to pleasure of the senses according to reason and the pursuit of virtue. And I want you to remember these words very, very carefully. Regulate, reason, and the pursuit of virtue. It has a lot to do with the five senses. Now we know what our five senses are: taste, touch, sight, hear, and smell. And they all form part of the pursuit of good living. And they involve pleasure. For example, I'm going to give you a scenario, and a simple scenario. For example, we know that the sense of smell is really strong in females. I say females because you understand where I'm going with it. Now, the pursuit of a good life suggests that our scent, as in our personal scent, must be attractive and making us approachable. For females, it goes a bit further, because some of us love perfume. I know there are some men out there that love to bathe in perfume. I understand that totally. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. However, let's take this scenario a step further. We have a co-worker or a family member who is physically affected by your perfume or your cologne. Reason would kick in and say to you to temper or to regulate the amount of cologne or perfume that you wear, especially when you are going to be around that person. That is reason. And that is what temperance is all about. The virtue that moderates our attraction of pleasures and provides balance in the use of things of the world. It ensures the will's mastery over instincts, and it keeps our desires within the limits of what is virtuous. It is one of the elements that separates us as human beings as opposed to basic animal instinct. Think about it. In the control over our emotions, temperance provides that bridge, moving from being a slave to our emotions to be a master of our emotions. Another definition, and this has more of a Greek flair, it is defined as moderation in action, thought, and feeling. Restraint has been studied by, as we would know, religious thinkers, philosophers, and even psychologists. It's considered a virtue, a core value that can be seen consistently across time, not only time, but cultures. And it's considered one of the four virtues. For it is believed that no virtue can be truly sustained in the face of the inability to control yourself. So if you cannot control excess, if you cannot master self, that is the core virtue. All others will have difficulties and problems. And when I did my research, I came across a gentleman by the name of Doug McNamara, and he says temperance is the first virtue that perfects man's ability to act well with oneself from within oneself. I'm going to read that again, because when I first read that, I thought that was like, wow. Temperance is the first virtue that perfects man's ability to act well within one's self, from within oneself. So it is taking the ability to control our inner desires and our inner feelings and our words, and it is allowing that, it is giving us the ability to put them under control. It brings into order appetite, and thus emotions like love, hate, sensible satisfaction, desire, aversion, and sorrow. All of those things are mixed up in temperance. It is primarily about desires for the greatest pleasures, the most natural operations of human beings, whose sole purpose is to preserve the individual and the species. That is why the greatest pleasures are to be found in the consumption of food, drink, and obviously in the union of the sexes. And so, as Mr. McNamara says, and he so eloquently puts it, temperance is mostly about the pleasures of meat and drink and sexual pleasures. Those pleasures result, as we said before, from the senses, the touch, the taste, the smell, the sound, all of those things. And finally, and this is a really beautiful thought that I'm going to leave with you before I leave my quote. Finally, he suggests that temperance brings about a spiritual or moral beauty of the person who has cultivated it, a beauty that can be compared to honesty. I thought that that was so beautiful. And so it says to me, as we go through this month, and I say to you, as we go through this month, let us really peel this whole concept of temperance. And as I end in the words of St. Thomas Aquinas, temperance is simply a disposition of the mind which binds the passions. As we go through this month, and as we peel the layers of temperance, I trust that you understand it more, and as we discuss it more, that we get to a fuller understanding of what really and truly temperance is and how God wants us to be temperate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Sherry, for sharing this with us. Please remember the quote, as she says, temperance is simply the, remind us of that, Sister Sherry?
No problem. Temperance is simply a disposition of the mind
to bind
the passions.
The passions. So let us try to remember this. For those of you who have just joined us, welcome to Healing Moments. This month we are covering the topic temperance. And Sister Sherry Sobers just spoke with us right now. Sister Dr. Corinthia UP will be joining us, and she will be covering the medical aspect of temperance. Her topic will be on satiety and obesity. Dr. Dupe?
Good afternoon, everyone. And it's good to be here. I am currently sharing my screen, I hope. And I am sharing my other screen. Okay. So my topic is, how do you know when you have had enough? And There is supposed to be a screen share that you're supposed to be seeing. I'm sorry if you're not seeing it, but the title is How Do You Know When You've Had Enough? So I'm dealing with satiety and hunger and such aspects. I want to, not this video, Ken, the other one, Dr. Dupuis video. Dr. Dupuis screen, sorry. I want to remind those of you who have been here before, when last month, when we discussed interpersonal relationships and we talked about the cells and the cells being able to talk to each other and to signal each other. And we talked about autocrine signaling and paracrine signaling, and we also talked about endocrine signaling. But do you know that our brain is also involved in signaling when it comes to matters of eating or diet? And I was looking up a lot of things on temperance, and I found one quote that says that temperance is the Goldilocks virtue. Not too much, not too little, just enough. I don't know if you remember the story of Goldilocks and the three bears, and the bed was too hard and the bed was too soft and the bed was just right, or somebody has been eating my porridge, etc. It's the Goldilocks virtue. So I just want to remind you of that. So there are hormones that control your eating, and those hormones are found in a part of the brain known as the hypothalamus. We also discussed the hypothalamus when we
Dr. Dupuis, sorry for interrupting. Can you share your screen, please?
I am sharing my other screen. I'm trying to tell Ken that Dr. Dupuis is sharing her screen. I'm not sure. I am sharing my other screen.
Tell her that just start sharing the other screen.
So I'm not sure how it's going to happen because, oh, okay. Ken, you were supposed to make my other sign. You were supposed to make me a co-host, Ken.
Your co-host on both of them.
Really? But
yes.
I'm sharing, so I'm not sure what happened there. Okay, let's
try again.
Try it again.
All right,
yeah, try again, please.
I'm going to try again. Beg your pardon, I'm not even seeing my. All right, hold on. This is where I am. All right. Yeah, sorry about that. I have to go around. That's what I did, and I'm supposed to be sharing my screen. Are you seeing anything now?
Yes, we're seeing you now. We're seeing your screen now.
You can see my screen now. I apologize for that.
Okay.
Right. So I was reminding you of hormones and cell signaling and going beyond that. So the hypothalamus is a part of your brain that controls your eating. It controls hunger and satiety. So there are three main hormones, but I'll talk about two in particular that affect your eating. So ghrelin, and the name sounds like it should be about food. Ghrelin is called the hunger hormone. It is released by some cells in the stomach, which are called X cells. And those cells release the hunger hormone, ghrelin, when the stomach is empty. Ghrelin then, as a good hormone does, travels through the bloodstream and acts on cells in the lateral hypothalamus. The hypothalamus then sends out other messages to your body that you are hungry, and it increases the motility of your stomach, meaning that when you eat, the food is going to start churning about, and it also increases gastric acid, and you eat. When the stomach distends or is full, then the amount of ghrelin that the cells release is decreased, and so that message goes to your hypothalamus, and you are able to stop eating. Right. And then there is another hormone called the leptin, the thin hormone. And leptin is produced by your fat cells or your adipose tissue. So I remember fat cells is where your body stores energy. So the more fat cells you have, or the more adipose tissue you have, the more leptin you produce. Now, the leptin acts on cells in the hypothalamus, another part of the hypothalamus, and it induces feelings of satiety, meaning that you are full, it is time to stop eating, or it is not time to eat. There are other factors that can induce the production of leptin. For example, if you're under emotional stress, if you're being chased, if you have to spend your life trying to run from your enemies, you probably will not feel very hungry because at that time you're concentrating more on staying alive. So people who experience extreme anxiety or depression, they produce a lot of leptin and they do not feel hungry as such, so they do not stop eating. So they stop eating, and also circulating insulin is also supposed to trigger your, to tell you that there is a lot of sugar in your blood, so you're not supposed to be eating. So leptin is the thin hormone, is the one that keeps you from eating too much. So, so why do we have obese people? Don't they have leptin and ghrelin like the rest of us? Do they have extra ghrelin? Do they not have enough leptin? What is the reason? So the answer is yes and no. There are some children who are born with congenital obesity, and that part of their brain is just not responding to leptin. It doesn't see leptin at all. And so they are always hungry and they keep eating, and they're going to be obese from small to old because that part of their hypothalamus is not responding to leptin. There are also some lesions in the brain. For example, you may have a tumor that affects the hypothalamus. You may have a stroke that knocks out a certain part of the hypothalamus. And so you're not able to, so you're either producing too much ghrelin or you're just not, you're not responding to the presence of leptin. And then there is leptin resistance, and that is what affects most obese people. The fact is they have a lot of fat tissue, or adipose tissue. They are producing lots and lots of leptin. So you're wondering why they're not thin if they're producing so much leptin. However, it seems like they become resistant to leptin. I'm sure you have heard about type 2 diabetes, where some people, even though they produce all of the insulin in the world, the insulin is not, the cells aren't able to read the presence of the insulin. And so they're insulin resistant and they develop type 2 diabetes. In the same way, some obese people are leptin resistant. So does that excuse and does that give a free pass to all leptin people, to all obese people to blame leptin resistance for their obesity? Are there other factors that affect how much we eat? So the no part, is there a difference between being hungry and wanting to eat? So that is where the pleasure part of the brain comes in, the limbic system, parts of the brain called the nucleus accumbens. Those are the parts of the brain that release dopamine when we feel good, when we want to feel good. Those are the pleasure parts of the brain. And so a lot of times, it is not so much about the presence of the hormone, but it is the pleasure principle. That's where temperance comes in. It's how much you just want to feel good by eating. Leptin and ghrelin have nothing to do with the type of food you eat. It is all about wanting to eat because you are hungry or stopping from eating because of leptin release. And so you are sated, you don't want more food. Leptin and ghrelin have nothing to do with wanting cake or pizza or food from any of the fast food places. those come purely because of our memory of how we felt good when we ate that particular piece of cake, when we ate that piece of chocolate, and how much pleasure we get. So it's all about release of dopamine from the brain. And there's also the matter of food availability. Once upon a time, there wasn't so much fast food, there wasn't so much calorie dense foods all around us. Now we have to exercise more temperance because the food is so available. There's so much cheap fast food. There is so much availability to the calorie dense foods that we have to now exercise our temperance. There is so much food that's high in sugar, there's so much that's high in salt, and we keep eating them even despite the fact that our stomach may be distended and we're not producing ghrelin and we're producing all the leptin in the world. There is the pleasure principle. So we also eat because of habits. So our eating habits are sometimes time controlled. So we eat breakfast at 7:30, it's 12:30, and even though we're not really feeling hungry, 12:30 is the time to eat, and so we eat. And after we eat, I know me, for example, I've always said that even if I've just finished eating my meal and somebody comes with a big plate of roast breadfruit and saltfish, I will still have it because it gives me great pleasure. And so that's why obesity becomes a problem. Yes, there is the question of leptin resistance, and yes, there are certain people who are going to need help, not by giving them leptin because they're already resistant. We're going to have to teach them other ways of eating, other ways of filling their stomach with food that is less calorie dense. So I remember Dr. Hansdale saying how to eat like a horse and lose weight. So he was saying, eat a lot of vegetables because they're filling, but they're not going to be high in calories. So in summary, eating behavior is controlled by hormones, but also by habits, by pleasure seeking, hedonism. Most of us who go to all-inclusive hotels, we don't just go for the bed. We go because there's going to be food all the time. By company, some people eat more when they're in the presence of others than when they're by themselves. Food availability, cravings, and sometimes diseases. If you have too much of certain hormones, even like cortisol, for example, you're going to get obese, right? And you're probably going to want to eat more because there's always that drive to satisfy yourself. I was looking in various church writings. I looked at Adventist writings, Buddhist, Catholic education, Catholic catechism, and all of them discuss the question of temperance. As a matter of fact, in Catholicism, gluttony is one of the 7 deadly vices. And I found in Signs of the Times, written by Ellen White, intemperance in the true sense of the word is at the foundation of the larger share of the ills of life. And it annually destroys tens of thousands. Intemperance is not limited to the use of intoxicating liquor. It has a broader meaning and includes the hurtful indulgence of appetite or passion. In the Catholic catechism, I found temperance consists in not eating and drinking more than is necessary, and not being either too greedy or too dainty or too choosy in regard to the nourishment one takes. And that is where my screen sharing ends. But I also found some information from some Buddhists about temperance as well. And they went on to say, sorry, I'll find it. That temperance is a general virtue that deals with urges towards pleasure and would tend to pull us away from what is right, from what is reasonable. And it talks about, as Sister Sherry mentioned, desire for drink, desire for play, for sexual pleasure, and even for revenge We have to learn to be temperate. We have to learn to be meek and humble and not desiring. We have a natural desire to eat, and that is good because we need to eat to live. However, this desire needs to be controlled since it tends to be stronger than is needed and pull people toward more eating than is needed. And that's from the spiritual fathers dealing with temperance in eating. So temperance is not only a religious virtue, but is a good health practice for good health. Because as we all know, obesity puts us at risk for many chronic diseases, including including hypertension and type 2 diabetes and heart disease. So we need to do our best to be temperate in what we eat. Thank you. I was a little long, I beg your pardon.
Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care. Yeah.
Welcome back. So for those of you who are now joining us or who have been listening in or viewing on Zoom and on YouTube, we'd like to welcome you once again. This month's topic is temperance. Sister Sherry Sobers spoke about temperance in a psychological sense, and she spoke about how we can control or resist certain urges. And Dr. Dupe spoke about temperance from a medical perspective and the different hormones that help to control our habits, particularly our eating habits. So at this time, we welcome you to send in your questions. There is no chat question segment, so please type in your questions. And for those of you who would like to ask your questions verbally, you can just raise your hands and we can select you so you can you can ask your questions directly. So thank you very much for joining us, and please type in your questions so that we can hear from you. We have a few comments right here. Let me see. So we have one person who is telling us, thank you for taking the time to enlighten us on the hormones that the connection to our hormones and obesity. So for those of us who have any other questions, please type them in or raise your hands. Or those of us who are on YouTube and you would like to directly interact with us, join us. Come on over to Zoom and you can ask your questions directly. Or you can type it in the chat. So do we have any questions? Dr. Dupe, you did ask a question. You did mention when people are going through certain stressful situations, they might refrain from eating. What about those who eat even when they are in a stressful situation or going through anxiety?
Yes, that happens sometimes. And it's because of the memory of the good feeling they get. For example, if I may use myself as an example, there are times when I'm stressed and I don't eat at all. There are other times when I'm stressed and the only thing I want to eat is Doritos and salsa. I call it my comfort food. And some people go for ice cream and some go for chocolate. Why do you think they call it comfort food? Because it makes you feel good. Actually, many of the medications that I use to treat mental illness cause increase in appetite because they help to take away the stress, and so you get back to your normal response to your ghrelin levels. But yeah, that comfort food is all about just feeling sorry for myself and I mean oneself and making oneself feel good. Yeah. So that can be an opposite response. However, when I'm going on a plane, because I have a fear of flying, you won't get me to eat anything. I probably starve for a whole day if I have to travel. So that kind of emotional stress prevents me from eating. Some people can't eat when they're going to do an exam because of the emotional stress. So it varies, yes.
Okay, great, Dr. DP. Thank you very much for that clarification. Um, Someone asked if Sister Sherry can repeat the quote, but I do have it here. It says, temperance is simply a disposition of the mind which binds the passion. Sister Sherry, someone asked if you can just give a
Sure.
quick synopsis of what you spoke about, because they're only now joining us. Welcome.
Well, welcome to that person as well. To summarize, I looked at the definition, the variant definitions of the term temperance as it relates to the senses. It has to do with the pursuit of a good life in moderation. It deals with self-control, the moderation of restraint. It not only speaks to desires as it relates to food, drink, and sexual pleasures, which all have to do with the different senses, smell, touch, that kind of thing. But it also has to do with it's in total opposition to basic animal instinct, and there is a high trying to find the word, a high correlation to reason. Our reason is one of the foundations that link in the bridge of temperance, and it has to do with your actions, your thoughts, and your feelings. So therefore, when you are able to reason and to be rational and to be self-constrained and self-restraint, it's you are on the path to practicing temperance. It is one I'm sorry, it's one of the virtues that perfects man's ability to control himself from within. So it has to do a lot with I don't want to say the inner man, but the ability for you to think through your action and to reason and to determine whether the way forward is a good way as it relates to virtuous living and moral living. I hope that kind of summarizes as much as possible.
So JB Reeves, I hope that summary was right. So I'm sorry. So I hope that summary was sufficient for the person who asked for a short synopsis of the psychological aspect. Do we have any more questions? Great. Please remember, if you don't want to type and you want to ask the questions yourself, you can just raise your hands and we will allow you to ask your questions. Pastor Lucas.
In the absence of questions, I would just like to make a comment here. During Dr. Dupuis' presentation, I was pretty much fascinated by what she said, because it lines up with what the psalmist says in Psalms 139:14. I will praise thee for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. To understand the dynamics of the body and how God set it up to take care of itself. The trouble is that sometimes because of our doings and our choices, we get it wrong. And when we get it wrong, then we've got to resort to the means God has provided to help us get it back right, whether it is the medical community with medication, and sometimes the medical community is not able to do anything about it. But praise God, we can always turn to the God who promised to help. And as those of us who would have experienced would know, that these are matters that we talk to God about also, because God will help us either through the medical community or he will choose to help us outside of the medical community. And we got to thank God for that. But the more we know about how we are made, I think we will better relate to our bodies in terms of what we do and what we don't do, and what we eat and drink, and not only that, what we think, because that's a part of it that I think we're going to get into. What we think, what we talk about, what we, all those other areas in terms of psychology and emotions and whatever else, those things also impact on the body physically. But praise God, we can turn to him in any case, any situation with which we're confronted.
Yeah, even the company we keep, Pastor Lucas, can affect our eating habits as well. And I needed to make the point that leptin resistance didn't come around just by itself. It usually happens because of the lifestyle choices. So it just becomes a vicious cycle. There is obesity because of lifestyle choices, when it's not the ones that have to do with the hypothalamus. If it's hypothalamic, then it's definitely physical, medical. But if it has to do with habits, the leptin resistance will actually come around and actually make the process worse. So, and that's why so many people who are obese have difficulty losing weight. And so they need, that help that is sometimes psychological. So in the same way, when you're trying to break an addiction, you have to choose the right company. Obesity also can be affected by company, and so we have to decide to choose a company that's not going to lead us into overeating.
Indeed so. J.B. Grieve says that we must acknowledge that we are not alone. He made reference to Prophet Elijah under the juniper tree, where he said Prophet Elijah was sad. So we must always remember that God is always by our side, and that we can lean on him and depend on him to help us to practice temperance in all that we do, in our actions, in the company we keep, in what we eat and drink. At this time, I would like to thank you all for joining us on this episode of Healing Moments. We want to thank our gracious hosts, Sister Sherry Sobers, Pastor Alvin Lucas, and Dr. Corinthia Dupuis. And we'd like you to join us next week, Thursday, as we continue on the topic of temperance. We ask you to share this with your friends, with your neighbors, with your family, so that they too can join and share in this healing moment session every Thursday at 6 p.m. on Zoom and on YouTube with the Good News Community Seventh-day Adventist Church. Thank you for joining us, and join us again next week, Thursday at 6 p.m.
Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care.